Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to finish out Chapter 3 today. We're going to talk about the Form 941 and how to fill it out. I'm sure if you've already started some of your homework, you're probably looking for some assistance with this particular form. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. All right. I haven't forgotten anybody with attendance here. Okay, I've got everybody. Okay, so everyone out, I know it might be a little bit hard to see, but you could, all the virtual students, feel free to follow along this with the slides. I'm just going to do kind of a quick overview of this particular form. And then I'm going to go through, I put up some practice problems in Cengage. They're essentially a second set of homework problems. The ones that are assigned to you are set A. This is set B. It's not worth any points, but we'll go through some of those problems so I can give you some practical experience with filling this form out. And then you're also welcome to work on them yourselves if you want some extra help. Yeah, Julia.
Hi, good morning. Can you also, are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm gonna need to go back later.
Okay, yep, no problem. And I see we got one more joining us here. Just make sure I didn't forget anybody. And okay, sorry. Got people, got stragglers coming in here. Okay, hey, hi, good morning, Donna. Okay, so there's this practice set that I put up because I'm sure you feel like you don't have enough homework problems to work on, but they're out there, and we will use them to kind of give you an idea of how this form is filled out. So remember, the 941 is a form that is filed on a quarterly basis, and it reports all of, and you can see from the lines here exactly what it reports. It reports all of the wages that was paid during the quarter. Remember, this is going to be due by the end of the month following the quarter end. So we've got these are due 4 times a year. So the total amount of wages that were paid, and this is actually line 2 are the wages that are subject to federal income taxes. When we get into Chapter 4, you'll see that not necessarily all of the wages are reported on there. These are the wages that are subject to federal income taxes only. But for our purposes in this chapter, just think of it as, it's the total wages. So, and it includes tips, other compensation. So those other compensation items like bonuses, commissions, all of that stuff that we talked about that is subject to taxation. So all of that for the quarter is totaled on that line 2. Now, line 3, how much federal income tax was withheld? Again, right now, you don't know how to calculate that amount, so don't worry about the calculation of it, but just be aware that that line 3, there is going to be the total amount of federal income taxes that were withheld during the quarter. So the federal income taxes that were withheld on those wages during the quarter. Then you can see we get down to, I guess I should kind of back up here a little bit. So all the identifying information, there's our employer identification number. Remember, we said that was on every single tax form. There it is up at the top. Information about the business. This box here, the 941 doesn't change from quarter to quarter. Like it doesn't, we don't have a first quarter 941, second quarter 941 up in the title. This is going to be applied, this is going to be used for all of the quarters. So up here, you're indicating which quarter you're filing for, right? So that's just a simple checkbox. So in this case, okay, that we know that this pertains to the first quarter of whatever year this is. Now we can assume that this is for 2022. Okay. The next part here that I kind of skipped over, which is necessary information. This is asking how many employees did you have on a particular date during this quarter. So in this case, March 12th, they want to know how many employees did you have on the payroll on March 12th. So the pay period that includes March 12th. So you would go back to that payroll that payroll register and count the number of employees on that March 12th, or that whatever period included March 12th, how many employees there were that were paid. And that's the number that they want entered on that line 1. Okay, this is the part here that right now pertains to Chapter 3, information about Social Security wages and taxes. So yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
So like for that thing for on March 12th, if March 12th happened to be a day off, but they were still an employee, then we would count them. But if they like quit like March 10th, we would not count them.
So for example, if we have a pay period that ran from March 1st through March 15th, that's our pay period. Sorry, I know that's kind of, you're off of the. So if the pay period ran from March 1st to March 15th, we're going to count the number. This pay period includes March 12th, right? So not the number of employees we have on March 12th, but the pay period itself that includes March 12th. So if, this is our pay period March 1st through March 15th, and the pay date was, let's say, March, 23rd, then we would look back at that payroll register on March 23rd that we ran, and we'd count the number of employees that we had at that point, because the March 23rd pay date pertains to March 1st through March 15th, and that pay period includes March 12th. Does that make sense?
So if they quit on March 10th, they still would have worked between March 1st and March 9th, so they still be counted.
They still would be within that, right, that pay period. So if they quit on March 10th, they're still going to get counted.
All right, thanks.
Absolutely. Yep, you're welcome. Here a little bit. All right, so down here, line 5, and you can see there are several parts to line 5. We've got 2 columns. The first column are the wages that are subject to each of these types of taxes. First line, taxable Social Security wages. Now in this case, this happens to be the same, but there are going to be instances where they're not the same. For example, if you've got employees who have reached that Social Security wage base, right, those wages over and above that 147 are no longer subject to Social Security tax, but those wages are still subject to income tax. So you would have, in that instance, you would have a difference between what's on line 2 and what's on line 5A, right? Does that make sense? You've got, remember we went through the Social Security wage base and the fact that we've got wages, any wages over and above 147,000 on a per employee basis are no longer subject to Social Security tax. So those wages wouldn't be included in this, but they are still subject to income tax. Yep. Anybody have questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay. So that's just one example of when you would see a difference between those 2 amounts. There are other instances as well that we'll get a little bit more into in chapter 4 when we would see a difference. But don't, like if you're doing your problem and you're like, okay, well, line 2 is $100,000. I know that line 5A is going to be $100,000. No, not necessarily, right? You can't just count on, once you calculated line 2, that it's going to be the same for these as well. So Social Security wages, and then they're multiplied by that full Social Security tax rate. Now, why are we using the full Social Security tax rate? I thought that was for SECA taxes, that 12.4%. Well, remember, the full tax rate is still 12.4%. It's just that half of it's being paid by the employee, half of it's being paid by the employer. So this is reporting the total amount of Social Security taxes that have to be then sent into the IRS. This would include both the amounts that were withheld from employee paychecks, as well as the amount that the employer has to contribute. Okay, so we're looking at the full amount that is now due to the IRS. If there are, and by the way, this form changed a lot during COVID. It's kind of switched back because we had a lot of special taxes and special, special tax relief that occurred during COVID. And so they inserted a bunch of new lines and stuff. So these, where it says qualified sick leave wages, qualified family leave wages, those, we're not going to concern ourselves with those specific lines, and just know that those can change from year to year. Okay, taxable Social Security tips. So these are the wages, the amounts that the employer paid if they received tips, and this is only for tips. We would include those here on this line. Okay, so for an employer that works in the restaurant industry, they're going to have an amount there on that particular line. Yeah.
So that's like the tip reports, right?
Yes. Yeah. The amounts that were reported by the employees, or that were I can't remember off the top of my head what they call that, the assumed tips, that if the employer is using that particular method. But those amounts then would be listed here. In this case, we've got Grantinelli Motors. They don't have tipped employees, so there's not going to be anything on that particular line. But if we did, we'd multiply that by the 12.4%. Again, and they tell you, it gives you the amount to multiply by right there on the form. Okay, so you don't have to try and remember, okay, what was that tax rate? Gives you that tax rate right there. Next line, 5C, we've got taxable Medicare wages and tips. Now, don't ask me why. They separate the tips from the wages for Social Security tax purposes, but then for Medicare tax purposes, they put it together on the same line. I don't know why that is. There must be a reason for it, but be careful with that, because if you've got wages and tips, now on this line, you're combining the two. But this is just for Medicare tax purposes. So you can see, again, we're going to multiply it by that full Medicare tax percentage of 2.9%. And so the tax is in column 2. The wages that are subject to that tax are in column 1. Okay. Questions about this first part of the form? Okay. Oops. Sorry, folks. I don't know you guys don't see it, but sometimes the camera moves on its own. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to get myself out of here. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right. Let's move on to the next part of the form. It's kind of hard to see. I will pull up a 941 so you can see the whole sheet. Although you can look, like Kathy's got her book. If you've got a copy of the book, you can look at that as well. You've got the full sheet there. Then total Social Security and Medicare taxes are added up and included on line 5E. So where are we here? one slide. So all of these amounts in column 2 are added up together. Oh, I forgot to mention as well. So this last line would be wages and tips that are subject to that additional Medicare tax. So if we have employees that have reached that $200,000 income threshold, then the wages that are subject to that tax would be listed here. So again, that's going to be different from these other amounts, right? That's almost guaranteed to be different unless you had all of the employees making over $200,000 within that quarter. All right. So those on that column 2 is all added up, and the amounts are listed here. Don't worry about line 5F. Line 6, we're including the Social Security and Medicare taxes, as well as the federal income taxes. And it says here, you'll notice all IRS forms, for the most part, will give you the instructions right there, what you need to add up, but you do have to read it. So I find that that's the issue that I have a lot with, especially with my income tax students, is they fail to read all of the, everything there. But it's right here on the line 6. Add lines 3, 5E, and 5F. Okay, line 3 was the amount of income taxes, federal income taxes that were withheld. Line 5E was the amount of Social Security and Medicare taxes that were withheld. Line 5F, we don't have anything in there, so that total is 0. So in this case, we're really just adding up 3 and 5E. So the total amount of taxes that were both withheld and owed by the federal, oops, I'm on the second page now, aren't I? Sorry, here we go. And so that were withheld as well as that are owed by the employer are totaled up here. Now, line 7. Line 7 always gives students heartburn. Fractions of cents. What the heck is this? This always makes students, it frustrates students. They don't quite get that, especially those of us who are accountants and we're like, okay, well, everything has to balance, right? We don't make just adjustments here and there. Well, on this particular form, we do. Because something weird oftentimes happens when you are multiplying by percentages on a per pay basis, and then you're adding up all of the pay for the quarter and multiplying by that same percentage. You'll get a difference. So it's the difference between, let me see if I can, I'll try to think up an example here off the top of my head, but it might not work. Hold on just a second. Because like I said, this is what oftentimes frustrates students, is trying to understand this whole concept. So let's say we've got and we're just going to talk about Social Security and Medicare taxes. We have, let's see, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 pay dates in a quarter. All right, each of those pay dates, we paid our employees, let's say we've got, let me make this, we just have one employee. And we paid them $1,252.72. That's subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. So each pay date, this is what we paid them. So to figure out how much Social Security and Medicare tax is due for each pay date, we would multiply this times, so for the employee's portion, Social Security, 6.2%, right? So 1252.72. So 7767. And so this is the employee portion, and then the employer portion, 7767. So for each payroll, the Social Security tax, we're going to add those two together. $155.34. And then for Medicare tax, so this is the Medicare tax portion, we've got $1,252.72 times 1.45%. $1,816. So employer portion, employee portion, 1816. So 3632. So for each pay period, this is how much we're withholding. Like I said, we're not going to worry about federal income taxes at this point. 155.35, 534. All right, so 191.66 for each pay. All right, well, we've got 7 pays that are included in this quarter. When we fill out our form, let's see if I can go back here. No, sometimes this works for me and sometimes it doesn't. When we fill out this form, I just want to remind you of what it looks like here. Okay, so when we're filling this out, recall we're entering the total amount of wages, and then we're multiplying that by the 12.4%. Same thing for Medicare. So, okay, if we have 1252.72 as our total wages, we would multiply that by 7 pays, right? 1252.72. So 8769.04. All right. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a 941 so we can enter this on here. That's awfully hard to see. Shoot. All right. So the amount that we would have then here in column 1 is 8769.04. And the amount, whoops. And then the amount for Medicare, 8769.04. And then we're going to multiply that by the tax rate. All right. So we will do that. So times 12.4%. $108,736. And then for Medicare, 8769.04 times 0.029, 254.30. You would add those up, 1087. For a total of 1341.66. All right, well, let's see how much we actually withheld. It was 191.66 for each pay times 7 pays. $1341.62. $1341.62 was what was actually withheld. $1341.66 is what we calculated was due on the tax return. We've got a difference of 4 cents. This is what we would have deposited, the $1341.62. So what we need to do here is to force this to be $1341.62. Now we only force it if it's a small amount because and due to rounding differences. If we screwed up in our calculation, that's a whole different story, right? So if it's like $25 off, then we've got a problem. If it's anything more than probably about 20 cents, and that's a pretty high number, then it's a problem with our calculation, a problem with the amount probably that we deposited. But when it's only 4 cents, that's just a rounding difference, right? So to fix that, what we do is we use this fractions of cents. So current quarter's adjustment for fractions of cents here on line 7. It's a little bit bigger so you can see it. So again, we have to force this 1341.66 to be 1341.62, which means we have to subtract 4 cents from it, right? So that's what we would do. Just put a minus there, 04. All right, there are a couple of other lines here for adjustments. Smaller now. Oops, not that small. A couple other lines here for other adjustments that we're not going to worry about. But line 10 is where we're going to combine. Oh, wait a minute here. Total taxes should go here too. Now we're going to combine line 6, 7, 8, 9. We don't have anything in 8 or 9, but this makes it 1341.62 because we're going to subtract that 4 cents. Okay. You will see when we get to the second page, oops, down here, this indicates how much we deposited over the course of that quarter. Now there are 3 different options here. There's if you owed less than $2,500, you haven't deposited anything yet, you make your deposit with the form. Second option is if you were a monthly scheduled depositor, and remember everybody starts out as a monthly scheduled depositor, we would have deposited in total this 1341.62 over the course of the month. And we've got to divide it out by each month. How much did we deposit each month? The total here would come out to this 1341.62. You'll see here, this is our total liability for the quarter. Whoops, 12. Whoops. 1341.62. It says here, total must equal line 12. All right, we haven't gotten to line 12 yet, but essentially line 12 is going to be the same for in our case, it's going to be the same as what's in line 10. Because we're not going to worry about any of these other credits. So 1341.62, non-refundable, we're not going to use that. Reserve for future use, we're not going to use that. Total non-refundable credits, we didn't enter anything in there, so it's 0. Line 12, total taxes after adjustments and non-refundable credits. We're going to subtract line 11G, which is 0 in our case, from line 10. Line 10 is 1341.62. So, as it says, this total here must equal this total here. That's why we have that adjustment for fractions of cents. It forces it to equal, to be equivalent. Okay. We've got another problem that we're going to work on where I think we've got some fractions of cents in there. So we will we'll get some practice on that. Okay. Does that make sense? It's just, so the fractions of cents is simply to make an adjustment for rounding differences. It's just because of the math. Okay. But keep in mind, whatever you have, where is it here? In this box is going to want, is what you're going to want this to equal. So essentially you're reconciling between the two. All right, let's see here. What else do I want to share with you on the 941? Okay, so I already went through adding that stuff up. So we're not worrying ourselves about those credits. Like I said, there are all kinds of special credits and deductions and things like that, that some of them have always been there. Some of them a lot of them were just specific to these last few years and they're going away. But don't worry yourself with those. Okay, we're just doing the basic calculations at this point. All right, so we total up here and you can see, so when we look at this example, where is it here? They made an adjustment of 15 cents. So this means that what they deposited over the course of the quarter was 15 cents less than what the calculation was for the total taxes. That's just a rounding difference. So their adjustment was 15 cents. Okay, so this is the amount. Let's see here. Then that is the total amount deposited, total deposits, refundable credits in this case, the 23,831.05. So that's on line 13G. Again, so you may have to, until you become familiar with this form, you may have to go through and read every single line. Most of them you'll realize don't pertain to you. Come on. Okay, so you'll see that on this particular example, though, they don't have 3 months. That's because they were not a monthly depositor. They were a semi-weekly depositor. Semi-weekly depositors have a separate form that have to be filled out. So anytime you've got, or if you were a next day depositor. So if you met those requirements because you had either the IRS told you you're a semi-weekly depositor, which remember, if we pay on certain days of the week, we're depositing on a certain day of the week for that semi-weekly depositor. Or if we have a next day requirement because we incurred over $100,000 of liability, payroll tax liability, then we would check this box and we'd have to fill out this additional schedule. It's called Schedule B. Okay, so that's the reason you don't see a number here, because they were a semi-weekly depositor. That means that the amount on that Schedule B is what has to match to that line 12 or line 10 amount. Okay, so let's look at the Schedule B. Do they have it? We have a Schedule B here. We will look at Schedule B though. I'll show you what the Schedule B looks like. In fact, let me give you a little preview here somewhere. This one doesn't have a Schedule B attached to it, so I've got to search for it. 941. Schedule B 2022. This is what Schedule B looks like. All right. So you see, again, at the top, employer identification number. We don't have to put the address and all that stuff on the Schedule B. This is going to accompany the 941. Calendar year entered here. So this can be used for multiple years. Again, we're going to mark the quarter that it pertains to. So in this case, for this particular employer, we would be marking January, February, March, because that was what's on their 941. And you'll see on the Schedule B, there are 3 months, and there are 31 boxes for each of the months. So in this case, we would have month 1 would be January. In the box that indicates the day, let's see, where is it here? Tax liability for the quarter. So the daily tax liability in the numbered space that corresponds to the date that the wages were paid. So, for example, Grantinelli, if they pay on the 1st and the 15th, then they would have an entry of the liability, the amount of wages that they owed on the 1st of the month, the 1st day of the month, and then also on the 15th day of the month. All of these are then totaled and entered here for month 1. Same thing for month 2. Same thing for month 2. So in this case, if it's February, obviously we've only got 28 days in February. So we're not going to use 29, 30, or 31. And then the same thing for March, the 3rd month. And then all 3 months are totaled and entered here. Then this is the amount that has to match that amount on line 10 of the 941. So this is what we're reconciling to for those fractions of cents. All right. This is, let's see here. So these are just questions about the business. If we stopped paying wages, then we would enter what date we stopped paying wages. That's just telling the IRS, don't expect to get another 941 from us because we're not paying wages anymore. Or maybe it's just a temporary, if we're a seasonal employer, we might not be paying wages during certain months of the year, during certain times of the year. Although this is the final date you paid wages. If you're a seasonal employer, don't have to file a return for every quarter. You check here. Again, this is telling the IRS, don't expect to get one of these every single quarter from us. Otherwise, they do expect to get a 941. Let's see if there's anything else. There's really nothing else here. Again, a lot of those are COVID related types of benefits. Yeah, Kathy?
So if you're paying the 1099, do you have to do the Form 941?
No, because you're not withholding anything for contractors, right? The only thing you file for the 1099 is at the end of the year, you file the 1099, and then you file with 1096 form, and that's what you send into the IRS. The 1096 just sums up all of the 1099s that you paid, that you issued, okay? So that's all, but yeah, you don't include the 1099 amounts on this form, only the wages. Okay, it's not contractors, only employees. Last part of the form is, so part 4 and part 5. Part 4 is giving the IRS permission to speak to somebody else. Like if there was somebody that prepared the form who wasn't the person who actually signed it, some sort of paid preparer, you could indicate yes there, and then it gives them permission to actually talk to the IRS on their behalf. Part 5, this is the signature. So this one's signed by the owner, phone number. If there is a paid preparer, all of this stuff would be filled out as well. P10 refers to a preparer tax ID number. So if you're a preparer, anytime you prepare forms that are then prepare forms for a fee for somebody else, you have to have a P10 number, and you get registered with the IRS in order to do that. Okay, so those are all of the parts of the 941. This is just going through all the stuff that we already talked about. But this will, if you're interested, you can go through, oh, what's that line for? This gives you a description of what that line exactly is for. If you have questions. Perfect. This again. So where do we get this information? We mostly get it from the payroll register, right? We get that information from the payroll register. We could also get it from the accounting records, general ledger, as well, but mostly it would come from our payroll register. But this is just telling you exactly where some of that information would come from. So if there were tips, it would come from those forms 4070, where the employees reported what those tips were. So this is going through each line on that form where you would get that information from. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of that. Okay, so again, if the total liability for the quarter is less than $2,500, then that payment can be made at the time that this form is filed. So that means that line, 12, the total liability, if that is less than $2,500 for the entire quarter. So in our case, it was $1,341. We could file that on a quarterly basis, and we can just send them a check with our 941. If it's more than $2,500, then those deposits should have been made either on a monthly basis or on a semi-monthly basis, or maybe next day, depending upon how much they were. If you are paying with the 941, there is a voucher that goes along with that form, 941V. The IRS, anytime you've got a payment voucher, they would put V at the end of it. So like if you're paying with your taxes, there's a 1040V. There's, that's V just means voucher. It's a payment voucher. There are some employers that can get special permission to electronically file their Form 941s, but believe it or not, a lot of employers, still especially small employers, they do it on paper. So it's just and it has to be postmarked by that due date. Let's see here. There are ways, so if you made a mistake on a 941, which can happen, if you have to file an amended one or a corrected one, that form is called a 941X. Again, X, anytime you see X with regard to the IRS, that means it's an amended form. You're making some sort of correction to it. There are 1040Xs, there are W2. Actually, I shouldn't say that. W2s are called W2C, corrected. But if it's, most of the amended forms are called X. I don't know why they made that one different. But that's what that 941X is if there was a mistake and you're correcting it. Okay, real quick, I want to talk about, before we go through some of those problems, penalties. I know you've got a homework problem or two that involve penalties. You'll see that there are lots of different types of penalties that the IRS can assess. Late penalties, non-payment penalties, underpayment penalties, non-filing penalties, and believe me, they will assess multiple penalties for a single infraction. These are the different, and there are different amounts, right? A lot of them are dependent upon, like the late penalties, the amount of the late penalty is going to be dependent upon how late you are. The later you are, the more the penalty racks up. I think one of them was for, and I can't remember off the top of my head, what, half of a percent for each month or partial month that you're late. So even if you are a month and a day late, they assess it for 2 months because you were part of a month late. And then they'll add interest on top of that as well. So for the amount of tax, if you haven't paid the tax, they will assess interest. And then they'll also assess interest. So they'll assess interest on the tax that's unpaid. They'll also assess interest on penalties if they are late as well. So penalties can really, you can really rack up the penalties with the IRS, both for income taxes and for payroll taxes, for all the different types of taxes. They've got all sorts. So if you didn't file the return on time, there's a penalty for that. If you didn't pay the full amount of taxes when they were due, there's a penalty for that. If you didn't make your deposits on time, even if it's just a day late, there's a penalty for that. If you did not submit W-2s on time to employees or those 1099 forms on time to the contractors, there are penalties for that. Not employment tax returns, this is kind of the same thing here, or actually the information returns. So I think what they're referring to there are, you have to give copies of those W-2s and 1099s to the IRS as well, and there's a deadline for doing that. So if you didn't supply them to the IRS on time, maybe you gave them to your contractors, but you didn't give it to the IRS on time. Well, they've got a separate penalty for that as well. Identification number. So if you did not, if you filed 1099s or W-2s and you did not collect the Social Security numbers from those individuals, the IRS will assess a penalty because you didn't collect that information as well. So all sorts of different penalties, and like I said, they're different amounts. And then there are also penalties on top of that for fraud. So if you intentionally did any of these things, most of the time these are just honest mistakes, right? But if you intentionally didn't file on time, intentionally didn't pay on time, you were trying to avoid that tax, then there can be civil and criminal penalties for that as well. Once you start, the IRS, if it's determined through a court of law that you intentionally, fraudulently didn't pay. And that's that. So, Social Security taxes. All right, questions before we do any of these problems? And we can go through some on Thursday too, like homework problems. You saw that, so the homework was extended. I don't know what I was thinking when I made it due today. Homework's not due until a week from now, but be careful because now you've got homework that's due at the same time as the assessment, which normally we've had those at 2 different times. And then we've also got the midterm exam next Tuesday. So you get a lot of things due next Tuesday. The cool part is they're due, nothing's going to be due then on the Thursday, and then you got spring break. So it gets all of that done and out of the way before spring break. Okay, but you've got a lot to do before then, right? All righty. So no further question. Oh, somebody had a question right there. Oh, that's a thumbs up. Thank you, Lisa. Okie doke. So let me show you where this is, if you guys want to follow along at home. So you'll see under chapter 3, I've got in-class practice, not graded. So this is just for extra fun. If you've got nothing else to do, I'm sure you've got other things to do, but this will give you some extra practice, and it's open until the end of the semester. So even if you wanted to, like when you're studying for the final exam or something like that, you can go back to it and take a look at it. All right. One thing I did, you don't see what I see. Sorry. Here we go. When I put this together, which was in the the few minutes before you guys came into class, these are all in opposite order. They're kind of backwards. So the hardest ones are first, and the easier ones are at the bottom. So just to kind of be aware that it's all backwards there when you're doing it. And hopefully, okay. So you guys at home, can you see that? You guys can see the screen all right here? All right, so the ones that we're gonna look at with regard to the 941, we're gonna start with number 11, which is right here. Well, it's actually number 8. It's 3.11b, but it's number 8 here. All right. Yeah, Lisa.
I'm sorry, I was looking for it and I did not see it. Was I looking in the wrong section? Should I have been looking in Cengage instead of at your?
Yes, it's not. I didn't put. I can put a link up, but I haven't done that yet. So just go directly to Cengage right now.
Okay.
If you're following along. Sorry,
Yes.
I didn't make that clear.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So here we've got Gallagher Company. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger here. There we go. And like I said, you've got similar problems in your homework. So Gallagher Company has gathered the following information needed to complete its Form 941 for the quarter ended September 30th. So this is the end of the third quarter, right? Using the information presented below, complete part 1 of Form 941, rounding to the nearest cent. Now, they don't really tell you when to round it to the nearest cent. So I realize that that's kind of vague. But that's the first place when you, and I know we're on chapter 3 now, I should have told you this right at the beginning, but if you're struggling to get the answer, that's the first place I would look. Did I round it in the wrong place? Okay, number of employees for that pay period, including September 12th, 15. Wages paid, 89,352.18. Federal income tax withheld. Social Security and Medicare taxes, wages, and then the total deposits for the quarter. All right. So in this one, they want us to just fill out part 1. So they're not asking us, and they really haven't given us enough information anyway to determine whether this was a monthly deposit or semi-weekly. We don't really know at this point. No, lines 5A and C on total taxable wages computed by multiplying the combined tax rate for both. We went through that. That's the 12.4% and the 2.9%. Small differences due to rounding may occur between this total and the total taxes that were withheld from employees' pay. This difference is reported on line 7 as a deduction or an addition as fractions of cents. All right. So, and here's a hint. They give you this hint too for that line 7. Fill in the Form 941 through line 6, and then fill in part 2, line 16 of Schedule B. So as I had mentioned, those actual deposits. So once you get to right before you try to calculate the fractions of cents, that's when you should probably stop and then go figure out how much was actually deposited. Okay, because that's the amount you're going to want to, the difference between that then and what's immediately before fractions of cents is the fractions of cents that you're going to use. Okay, all right, so, so that instruction is right there that they indicate. All right, oh shoot. All right, I can make this a little bit smaller so that I can actually see. Okay, so on these problems, they don't give you the 4 boxes. They just want you to, that's a drop down there. So third quarter, they've already filled out all of this stuff for us. Okay, so number of employees who received wages, tips, or other compensation. And it says including March 12th. It would normally, and let me pull up what it actually looks like. And I don't have the 941 anymore. So hold on. I want to show you what it actually looks like here. Okay, so on the 941, what it actually says is number of employees who receive wages, tips, other compensation for the pay period, including March 12th, if it's quarter one, June 12th, if it's quarter two, September 12th, if it's quarter three, or December 12th, if it's quarter four. Okay, so depending upon which quarter. Now on this problem, they've not fixed that. It says March 12th and we're in the third quarter. It should say September. August 12th. August 12th? Yeah. September 12th, sorry. September 12th, right. Okay. So there were 15 employees. So that's what we're going to put here. It's 15. All right. We're going to go in box 2. 89, 352, 18, right? All right. Federal income tax withheld. They've given us that. 10,195. There. All right. Taxable Social Security wages, is it the same? 89, 352, 18. Yeah. So 89, 352, 18. And before we calculate anything, we'll just go ahead and enter the Medicare wages and tips. 89, 352, 18. All right. So at this point, we're going to multiply that amount by the 0.124. $1179.67. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. $25.91.21. Is that right? Okay. 25.91.21. Okay. That's all we need to do there, but now we need to total up the total Social Security and Medicare taxes. So we're going to add these two together. Plus 13,670.88. Tax due on unreported tips, we don't need that. Total taxes before adjustments. Now we're going to add line 3, 5E, and 5F. 5F is a 0. So 13,670 plus 10,195. 23,865.88. All right. Now, yeah. So the amount that was deposited was 23,865.92. So the difference between those two is how much?
94 cents.
94? 865?
-4 cents.
Yeah, it's 4 cents. Actually, in this case, it's positive. It's plus 4 because we're wanting to match to the amount of deposits. So we have to add 4 cents here in order to do that, right? Not going to do anything for 8, 9, line 10, total taxes after adjustments. We're going to combine line 6, 7, 8, and 9. So this is going to get us to 23, 8, 65, 92, which is the same as what our deposits were.
So, teacher, excuse me, I have a question.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can do 10 minus 6, and then you can put.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's see, reserved for future use, we don't want. So no non-refundable credits, and I don't know if they want, sometimes they want you to actually put the number in, even though it's a 0. I'm gonna leave it blank for right now and see what it does. If it tells me that it's wrong. 23, 865, 92 is the amount that we would put in line 12. Total deposits for the quarter, 23, 865, 92. Total deposits and refundable credits, 23, 865, 92, 13G. Balance due, if line 12 is more than 13G, it's not, enter the difference. See the instructions, overpayment. If 13G is more than line 12, enter the difference. So this is if you, again, not due to rounding, right? We're not looking for a 4-cent refund, right? We're just gonna, that's only due to rounding. And now we'll check my work. Let's see if it wants, okay. To match the individual amount. Well, so I realized that Lisa asked the question, so the company amount has to be changed to match the individual amount, not necessarily. Now, when you're doing your calculations, yes, it's going to be, you know, each amount would be equal in this case. When you made your deposits and you've got some problems where you've got a different, slightly different amount that the company pays, as opposed to what is paid is withheld for the employee. I think there's a problem or two in there where that is the case. So that would probably end up being one of those fractions of cents differences. Okay. So again, you're going to match to what the actual deposit was. And yes, and so what you can do is just enter in what was deposited, take line 10 minus line 6, that's going to be line 7, right? And if it's positive, it's going to be positive, and if it ends up being a negative, it's going to be negative. All right. So there's all of those. Questions on this one before we go to the next one? Okay. Let's go to the next one, which 12B. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the information. So they are a monthly depositor, this is Gallagher. And now they're giving us the information about when the deposits were made. So they've gathered the information needed to complete 941. They are a monthly depositor, the following monthly tax liabilities during this quarter. So we already filled out the rest of the 941. We've got to enter this information in. So 7981.75 and the rest of them. Okay. So we need to indicate B, monthly depositor. This is it, instead of checking a box on the form itself, it's check the box that pertains. This one is just a drop-down menu. All right, so, and we're gonna enter in here our liabilities. So 7981.75 for the first month. This is just a matter of transferring these numbers. 7984.90. Did I get that right? 7984? 70, is it 7984? 90 or 75? 79, okay. 7989.27. And then we will add those three together. $23,955.92. Their total must equal line 12, which that was the amount, wasn't it? We had. Anything else? Oh, here we go. We need to, anytime there's a drop down as well, do you want to allow an employee? I think this answer, did they tell us no? Company does not use a third-party designee. Okay, so we're going to say no here. And there's all that. Check my work. Smaller. There. Oh, did I? Am I? 7891. Did I transpose them? I did. 7891. So this is wrong too, because I added those three. You guys are welcome to correct me. 7891.75 plus 7989.27, 23,865.92. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay, so that would be the second part of it. Questions about that? That's fairly simple. The only reason I screwed it up is because I transposed the numbers. Okay, so let's look at 313. All right. So Stan Barker opened Quick Stop Market on January 2nd. Business is subject to FICA taxes at the end of the first quarter. Barker must file Form 941. Company is a monthly depositor. All right. Address that they've given us, date filed April 30th. Each employee is paid semi-monthly on the 15th and the last day of the month. So here is the quarterly wage and how much was withheld. All right, and then the total taxes per payday. Here, all right, so this is a little bit more complex. Now we're getting the information that would be on the payroll register. And we've got to enter this, transfer this then to the 941. Yeah, okay, same stuff here. All right, so this is the first quarter, right? They've already got that filled out. Number of employees who received wages, how many do we have here? 4? Wages, tips, and other compensation. Quarterly wages, so 55,890. Oops. Federal income tax withheld. Federal income tax here, so 4680. Tell you what, that monitor needs to be bigger behind you. Maybe it's just me. Okay, so taxable Social Security wages. Let's see. Guess it's the same as the 55,890. So 55,890 here. And Medicare, 55,890. Now we got to do some math. If that multiplied by the percentage, 6930.36. And then the same thing here. $1621.81. And then we're going to add those two together. Total Social Security and Medicare tax. And it tells you right there, add column 2 from these lines. Plus 8551.17. Go. Nothing on line 5F. Total taxes. Now we're going to add line 3 and line 5E. Plus 13,231.17. All right. So now we're going to stop at this point. We're not can't really do the fractions of cents yet. Now we're going to calculate what the deposits were. Right? So this is the total amount, and we're going to do it on a per month basis. So each month, I want to see if there's any additional information. Yeah, so we'll multiply each of these by 2. In deposits for the quarter.
So he's taking 13.
2205.21. We'll go down here. Sorry, I interrupted you. Is it 2205.31 per pay period, right? Times 2. 4410.62. So in theory, these should all be equal. However, we want to make sure. Okay. And then we add those up. 13,231.86. Wait, did I do that wrong?
26.
26. That's not right though. Because 6 times 3 is 8. So 2205.21. Oh, it should be 42, not 62, shouldn't it? 2205.
It's 42.
Yeah, 42. That's where I messed up. So now, here we go. 26. 13,231. 6. Okay, so now this is what our line 12 has to be. 13,231.26. That's what's going to go here. It also should go here. 26. All right, so using that method, 13,231.26 minus 13,231.17, 9 cents. That's our, did I get that right? So total taxes, oh, I've got this on the wrong line. Sorry, 13. That one above should be a 0. Anything there? 9 cents. And it's positive. Okay. So nothing on line 11A or 11B or 11C, 13,231.26. Nothing there. There. Total deposits for the quarter, same thing. 13,231.26. And total deposits, so 13G, 6. We shouldn't have to enter anything else in because we have no balance due and no overpayment. Let's see. No. Check my work. Go. Nope. What did I do wrong here? How did I get that right, but this wrong? Did I enter it in wrong?
0, 6, 20.
Oh, 1620. Okay. Questions? All right, let's see, that was, let's go over here. This one was, which number was this? 13, so 14. All right, oh, we got some tips. Right on. All right, so Beech Tree Inn, owned by Dawn, employed the persons listed below. Also given are the employees' salaries or wages, the amount of tips reported to the owner. Tips were reported by the 10th. Okay, good. Federal income tax and FICA tax to be withheld from the tips were estimated by the owner and withheld equally over the 13 weekly pay periods. Employer's portion of FICA tax on the tips was estimated as the same amount. All right, so nobody's over that. 5 weekly pay days in July, 4 in August, 4 in September. Actually, is there a Schedule B with this one? No, I want to do, hold on a second. I want to show you how to fill out the Schedule B. We've got like 6 minutes left, so let me see, is that one? Yes, okay. Sorry, we'll skip over that other one with the tips. Okay, so taxable wages withheld, Hamilton Company, semi-weekly depositor. All right, for the first quarter. So calculate for each date, multiply the gross wages by the FICA rate. Yeah. Okay. These were the pays, the pay days. So complete Schedule B. All right, so this is for the first quarter. for calendar year. Did they say what calendar year? 20 dot dot, all right. Okay, so in the first month, where are we here? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm confusing with the last one where it had 4 paydays and then 3 and then, but anyway. Okay, so here's our semi-monthly paydays. Gross and taxable wages and the amounts withheld. So FICA, I would assume that's the total FICA. All right, so on the 15th, we're going to add up the OASDI, the HI, and the federal income tax. So 2120.40 plus 495.90 plus 4180, 6796.30. It's going to go on the 15th. 676.30 on the 15th, and then on the 31st, I'm going to do the same thing. 2039.8 plus 477.5 plus 4090, 6606.85. And then we add those two together. Plus 13,403.15. Sorry. That's month 1. Month 2. So on the 15th, we've got 1968.50 plus 460.38 plus 3996, 6424.88. On the 15th. And then February, of course, only has 28 days. So we've got 1796, 14 plus 420.07 plus 3797, 601321. And then we're going to add those together. Plus 12,438.09. Here. And then month 3. So 1785.60 plus 4176 plus 3790, 5993.20 on the 15th. The 20. And then 29th. We've got 1822.80 plus 6241.10. And that's on the 29th, so be careful there. And then we'll add those two together. Yes. 12,241.30. And we're not done with the math yet. We got to add all 3 of those together. 12,438.09 plus 13,403. Whoops. 3808,254. All right. And then they want to know when they would have made the deposits. Now, on the Schedule B, what you're putting, the dates that you're using are not the deposit dates, the liability dates. So the date that the actual liability was incurred, which would be the payday. Okay. So January 15th was a Tuesday. Does anybody remember when we do this? So it's so Tuesday, would we do on the 18th? All right, January 31st was a Thursday.
February 6th.
February 6th, the Wednesday, right? February 15th was the Friday.
February 20th.
February 20th. February 28th was a Thursday again, so
March 6th.
March 6th. March 15th was a Friday,
March 20th.
20th. And then the Friday, the 29th,
April 3rd.
April 3rd.
Yeah, so
What
I have
did I
a
do?
question here.
Whoa, I got them all wrong.
Yeah, you do mistake.
What did I do?
Yeah, it's supposed to multiply this one by two times. Yeah.
Okay, so
plus.
this is not the total
Yeah,
amount. Okay,
yeah, two. It's 9. Yeah.
all right. So you gotta tell me that before I get all the way through there. Okay, so I'm only gonna do one here just to verify that. So 6796.3 times 2, 13,592.60.
No, sir, it's not. It's 9. Let me see. So you take this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got the federal in there as well, sorry. You're right. So OASDI times 2,
Yeah.
Medicare times 2, plus the federal income tax. All right. I'm just gonna do the one. So 2120.4 plus 21 plus 495.9 plus 495 is 4180. 9412.60. There we go. Sorry.
So, what do you get that answer? Again?
Okay, so this one, and my mistake was I thought this was total. I thought this was both employer and employee portion of that. It wasn't. The FICA, and I should have, the key here is withheld. I should have, see, I didn't read carefully enough. That's the amount that was withheld. So that means that the employer also had that same liability. So I took the 212040 times 2. HI 495.90 times 2. Federal income tax is only times 1 because that's the amount that was withheld. The employee pays that. So this times 2 plus this times 2 plus this.
Okay.
Mhm. Other questions? So this would be the same for the 31st. And then we would add those together and then add all 3 of those together. Okay? Questions? I got office hours right now, so if you've got time, you want to stick around. So like this one. Please feel free to leave if you've got to go. You guys have other things going on. Yeah, you're welcome, Julia.
For age, I have a question for
Thank you.
65.
Yeah. Okay. Number,
Yeah, because 65, everybody's supposed to go in retirement. If you are 65 years old,
if you're 65, okay, if you're 65, say that again?
if you have 65 years old, you cannot work it because it's age, you're supposed to go in retirement.
No, you don't have to, you can still work. Yeah, there are certain industries that will force you to retire, but most industries you don't have to. There's no required retirement age. There's nothing mandated. So you can work and collect Social Security.
No, because I'm seeing in a course,
Oh,
if you have a 65 years old, you can go in retirement.
if you're 65,
Yeah.
then, well, and for most people these days, it's 67. You can start collecting Social Security. Is one of the questions?
Yeah, because for the case that I'm telling you this one because I'm reading on the course and I'm seeing if you have 65, you can go in retirement. That's legal.
Yes, well, and you can retire anytime if you have if you can afford it, right? You can start collecting Social Security. Well, for most people, like I said, I think almost everybody now, it's age 67. That's when you collect Social Security. Medicare is still 65. Age 65, you're eligible for Medicare. But you don't have to stop working. Or you can retire earlier if you want to.
So
and if you can.
Yeah,
Most of us can't. Most of us,
know,
even at that age, are like, no, can't do
because I
it.
want to know specifically because I'm 65 for my consent. So if you work and you have 65 age, so you're supposed to go in a retirement for my consent. And so when I say no, because that's my question. Because if somebody puts 65, why president have 80 or 67, because
Yeah.
it makes the same function.
Yeah,
And then somebody, because I'm seeing a book,
yeah,
if you have 65, you're supposed to go in retirement or president. And I don't say
right, he's 80, yeah.
No, I don't say this one.
Yeah.
President go over, or it's the same function.
Yeah, there's nothing for, like I said, for most occupations, there's no mandatory retirement age. Now, there may be companies that, well, it's kind of difficult because as we learned, you can't discriminate solely based on age. You can encourage people to retire though, and sometimes they will do that. I know for DMAC, they've done it in the past where if you're close to retirement age, they maybe say, okay, if you retire this year, we'll give you 1 year salary, like to encourage you. Say, oh, okay, well, get that and then I get my retirement. But there's no, unless you're a pilot, pilots do have a mandatory retirement age. Certain occupations where safety is an issue if you're older. And there are certain occupations where it's not the age, but maybe like, okay, if you're a fighter pilot in the military, you cannot wear glasses. You can't, like, once you get to a certain age, most people wear glasses. So, yeah, but there may be other factors that force people to retire from the position that they're in, but you can be 110 and still work. There's nothing
for Social Security, because I'm still confirmed to my exercise.
Right.
For Social Security, until the age is 65 years.
The age to start receiving it. Yeah, when you're eligible.
Confused because it's like exercise. You say somebody can make a two choice.
Yeah.
So for the age, I'm think if somebody say you can you can start for 65.